Welcome to Nice and Blunt. My name is Adam Riancho, and these are my Week 1 running back rankings for 2024. It's good to be back. I've been waiting for these rankings videos. I feel like this is more my bread and butter than some of those live stream videos. But let's get going. Obviously, Nick Chubb and Jonathan Brooks are not part of this video. We all knew you couldn't start him when you drafted him. But at number 1, I am going with Jonathan Taylor versus the Texans. I think he is the clear best play this week because when you look at this matchup, holy shit, he owns the Texans. In his last 4 games against Houston, he's averaging 6 yards per carry, 168 total yards per game, and with 6 total touchdowns, an average of 26.7 half PPR points per game. If you remember the last time he played against the Texans in week 18, he could not be stopped for some odd reason. They took him off the field for the final play of the game, and that was a terrible, terrible decision. So he is the reason I am taking the Colts to win this matchup. I think Taylor's just going to be too hard to stop, and with the added bonus of Anthony Richardson taking away some defensive attention, holy shit, he's going to be a nightmare. He's going to see at least 30 touches in this one. That's what's happened each of the last 3 games against Houston. So Jonathan Taylor, a must start. You are already starting him, but expect a week-winning performance from Taylor. He is going to be a matchup nightmare if he's on the other side of the board. I hope you don't face him. But in the 2 spot, I'm going with Bijan Robinson versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think the Falcons are going to lean on Bijan a bit extra early on, given Cousins is coming off of his Achilles injury. And I think they just want to get off to the right foot. They're going to lean on their best player, and Bijan's going to catch a lot of passes. You were already starting him. There's no way you were benching Bijan based on where you drafted him. But same applies with Breece Hall, my RB3 this week. And if you look at this matchup, it wasn't the best. The Niners only allowed 90 rushing yards per game last year. They were a tough spot to be in, but I don't really care. Breece can catch 10 receptions if necessary. And you know Aaron Rodgers is probably going to lean on him a little bit extra, given he's also coming off of an Achilles tear himself. So these guys, there's no chance you're benching him. And yes, I do have Christian McCaffrey a little bit lower than you probably expect. He's my number 4 option this week, but he was coming off a preseason injury. He hasn't practiced in a while, and I'm not worried about it. He should definitely be good to go by Monday night. You're never benching him when he's healthy, but there's also the looming situation regarding Trent Williams, and that offensive line is a little suspect behind him. So if Williams doesn't play, that's a slight concern, but it's CMC at the end of the day. You're never going to bench him. I just have him at number 4, not number 1, given the matchup and situation. But all these 4 at the top here, who are you kidding? No one is benching guys you drafted in the 1st and 2nd round. And at number 5, I'm going to go with DeVon Achane of the Dolphins versus Jacksonville. Dolphins playing at home in September, that is a recipe for success. This could look like that Denver matchup that we saw last year where the Dolphins put up 70 points. I don't think it's impossible for that to happen. The concern with Achane is his long-term health. If he can't stay healthy, then that's why his price was diminished. But at the moment, he's fully healthy. Why would you be hesitant? You are starting DeVon Achane. 30-plus fantasy points is always possible with him in your lineup. So these top 5 guys are just locks. No one is benching them. Don't even think about it. That would be idiotic to do. But at number 6, I'm going with Saquon Barkley of the Eagles versus Green Bay in Sao Paulo, Brazil on Friday night. The Packers had the 5th worst rushing defense last year. They allowed 128 yards per game on the ground, and you know that the Eagles want to show off their new weapon, make the Giants feel jealous. So he's going to dominate, and I do think he leads them to victory. I'm taking Saquon as my RB6. But at number 7, I'm going with Isiah Pacheco of the Chiefs versus Baltimore. There's no Hollywood Brown. There's a rookie wide receiver making his debut, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire has already been ruled out. So unless you really believe in Samaje Perine, Deneric Prince, and Carson Steele, then maybe you're worried about it, but why the fuck would you care about them? They will lean a little bit extra on Pacheco in what is likely going to be a massive shootout. So I'm definitely starting Pacheco. I think he's a top 7 option this week. At number 8, I'm diminishing Jahmyr Gibbs in the rankings just a little bit. I would normally have him probably like top 5 when fully healthy, but I think they might lean on Montgomery just a little bit extra in week 1, given that Gibbs still might have a slightly sore hamstring. He did get hurt in the preseason. So I'm not worried about him long term. I just think it might just be a game plan type of decision this week, but I still have him top 10. This game is definitely going to turn into a shootout, and I think 100 yards and a touchdown still feels like a very safe prediction for Jahmyr Gibbs. You cannot bench him if you drafted him. And same applies with Josh Jacobs of the Packers. This game against Philly in Brazil is probably also a massive shootout. And the Eagles have a bad secondary. They're a tougher matchup on the ground, but there's no backup running back in Green Bay at the moment. And Jacobs is going to get a massive workload. They also probably want to show off their new weapon as well. So I'm definitely trusting him. I think early in the season, until Marshawn Lloyd gets healthy, you have no concerns. He will see a workhorse role week in, week out. He's a top 10 play until we see otherwise. But at number 10, I'm going to roll with James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. I love this matchup at home versus Arizona. The Cardinals were literally the worst ranked run defense of 2023. Last year, they averaged 143 yards allowed on the ground to their opponents. So James Cook will dominate. And you know that Joe Brady also likes to run the ball. This game has blowout potential. They could win by over 20 points. And Curtis Samuel has a turf toe injury. Keon Coleman making his rookie debut. I think this game is going to heavily lean on James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, and of course, Josh Allen. So that's the trio you want here. They could hang 40 on Arizona, and James Cook, I think, is a top 10 option in week 1. At number 11, I'm going with Derrick Henry of the Baltimore Ravens at the Chiefs. Yes, he often has a slow start in week 1 historically, but that was with the Titans. It could look different. And at the moment, he's 100% healthy. At age 31, that was your big concern if he'll play a full season. So in week 1, fire him up. You were not going to bench him, but I'm not worried about them easing him in. They get a mini bye after this Thursday game for him to recover. Why not give him a touchdown in his debut? So there's tiebreaker implications in this matchup between the Ravens and the Chiefs. I think they're going to let him loose. Why would they hold him back? They need this win. I think the Ravens do get the win, and Derrick Henry scores at least 1, if not 2, touchdowns in this matchup. So he's a must start. You already knew that. But at number 12, I'm going with Travis Etienne at the Dolphins. Miami did have a top 7 run defense last year, giving up 97 rushing yards per game on the ground. But in catch-up mode, I expect the Jags to be trailing. He could catch like 6+ receptions. I think he's going to get a lot of targets. There's a lot of new chemistry to be established with Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie, along with Gabe Davis as well. So I expect them to give Etienne plenty of volume here. I'm not worried about Tank Bigsby at all. And last season, Travis Etienne started the year in the first 2 months as like a top 3 option in fantasy. So it could happen again. And I think he's a guaranteed lock in your lineup, a must start with Etienne this week. But at number 13, this is probably going to be the lowest ranking I give you on Kyren Williams all season. I am a little bit worried about this matchup. I have no concerns about the punt return possibilities, but Detroit is tough. Last year, they had the second best rushing defense. They only gave up 89 rushing yards per game. And if you look at their playoff game last year in January, Kyren Williams only put up 7.5 half PPR points. He had a total of 70 yards, only 1 reception, 0 touchdowns in that matchup in the wild card round at Detroit. So kind of a tough spot here. I'm a little bit worried about it, and that's why I am lowering him outside the top 10. But you cannot bench him based on where you drafted him. There is no chance you are putting him on the bench. I'm just lowering expectations because of the matchup. He's still probably going to put up double-digit fantasy points, and I think it would be foolish to keep him out of the lineup. I'm just tempering expectations because it's the Lions. At number 14, though, I got Kenneth Walker of the Seahawks versus the Broncos. And yes, the Broncos last season had a bottom 3 run defense last year. It was really terrible, especially because of that Dolphins game that inflated those numbers, but they were actually very average, almost like better than most other defenses against the run in the back half of last season. So 137 rushing yards per game is a little misleading. I don't think it'll be that atrocious this season, but this offense for the Seahawks is brand new. We don't know exactly what to expect. We also don't know if it will work or not. So how many touches is he going to get? What is the role for Zach Charbonnet? There's a world where Kenneth Walker is like a top 8 running back this season, but until we know exactly what the touch split will be between him and Charbonnet, I'm going to keep him outside the top 12. At 14, though, you're definitely starting Kenneth Walker. It sounds like he has workhorse potential in this offense based on the coaching staff's comments that really seem to like him. So I still trust him, but at number 14, I'm not ready to put him in the top 10 just yet. At number 15, though, I think one of the safest RB2s you can find this week, it's Rachaad White versus Washington, who had the 6th worst run defense last year. The Commanders allowed 127 yards per game on the ground. So this is a real good spot for Rachaad White. The Bucs should also have the lead against a rookie quarterback, so I think the game script favors him, and I think from a floor standpoint, Rachaad is one of the safest you can find. He might not find his way into the end zone, but if he does, I think you're locked into 15 plus points, and even if he doesn't, you're still probably going to get at least 10 or 12. That feels guaranteed. So I'm trusting Rachaad. You drafted him relatively high. He's a very safe option moving forward. But number 16, I have David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions. It's a great offense. There's high shootout potential in this game versus the Rams, and Detroit is probably going to lean a little bit heavier on Montgomery early in the season because of that hamstring injury that Gibbs had a few weeks ago. So I still prefer Gibbs. I'm not willing to put Montgomery above him, but I still think a touchdown is probably guaranteed for Montgomery in this matchup. He's probably going to see close to like 15 touches overall. So I think he's very safe. As the season goes on, I think he might start to fade, but at the moment, I think you can trust him. At number 17, though, I have James Conner at the Buffalo Bills, and when healthy last year, Conner was a fucking stud. He averaged over 15 points per game when healthy, and right now, he's healthy. Benson is not a threat this early in the season, and you're probably going to get more targets as well for Conner because they're definitely going to be in catch-up mode. I do expect them to trail against Josh Allen, so fire him up. I think he's an excellent start, and I kind of want to rank him higher, to be completely honest with you, but James Conner, definitely one of the better RB2s you can find. At number 18, I have Raheem Mostert of the Dolphins, the second RB2 in my rankings. And against Jacksonville, I trust him. Achane is going to be the RB1 this year, but Mostert still has a big role. They gave him a contract extension for a reason, and I think it especially factors in on the goal line. I do not see him evaporating on the goal line. He scored 21 total touchdowns last year, so I think you can still fire him up with confidence. The Dolphins at home in September is always a good spot to be, and I know he's 32, but he's fully healthy at the moment. I'm not willing to bench him in this Dolphins offense. There is always fantasy gold to be had, so he's a top 20 play. I want Mostert in my lineup this week. At number 19, though, I have Joe Mixon of the Texans at Indianapolis. And what exactly will this offense look like? We did not see him in the preseason, so it's a little bit of a gamble. I still trust him. They gave him a big contract extension for a reason, but Mixon's role is not totally obvious to predict. I do think he probably scores a touchdown, though, and keeps you viable from a fantasy standpoint. I'm going to start him for sure based on where you drafted him. I think it would probably feel dumb not to, but I'm expecting low-end RB2 production out of the gate. I think he'll be fine. More so of a floor play this season compared to his high ceiling with all the touchdown and target volume last year in Cincinnati. But I could be wrong. He could be a top 10 running back, and this ranking might look like significantly too low when the week is over. But I think the game script is going to favor the receivers in this one, not as much with Mixon. So just my RB19, still in my lineup, just not like a clear top 15 play in week 1. Number 20, though, I have Aaron Jones of the Minnesota Vikings going on the road at the Giants. And I am a little worried about Aaron Jones long term. His health is going to be a factor this year at 29 years old. He always misses games. But for week 1, he's fully healthy, and you can definitely fire him up with some confidence because the Giants were a bottom 4 run defense last year. They gave up 132 rushing yards per game. And although it's a new team, I still think Aaron Jones is a very electric runner of the football. He's very talented, and I do not want to miss out on his upside. He could put up like 25 fantasy points, and I wouldn't be shocked if that happens. But the question here is, what will his snap share alongside Ty Chandler actually look like? Is it going to heavily favor him, or will it be a committee? I think it's going to be closer to 50-50 than like 80-20, probably somewhere between like 60-65% in favor of Aaron Jones. So I like him. I think he's a good play this week. The matchup is excellent, and I see a decent role for him early in the season while he's healthy. Get him in your lineup while you can. But at number 21, starting to hit the flex territory, but still low-end RB2 consideration, I have Alvin Kamara of the Saints versus Carolina. And if you look at his last 5 games against the Panthers, he's a lot more mediocre than special. He averages 3.7 yards per carry. That's not good. Only 3 catches per game. Last year, he averaged over 5 per game. So that's a diminishing return on the ceiling. And an average of 72 total yards per game is fine, but only 2 touchdowns in 5 games is an average of 11.1 fantasy points per game in half PPR. So I'm not ecstatic to start Kamara this week. I think in division, the Panthers might keep him out of the end zone and shut him down. I don't think he has the true ceiling unlocked for this matchup. And at 29 years old as well, I'm going to be concerned that he gets hurt as the weeks go by. But at least this week, he's definitely a safe floor play. I think in full PPR, he is more valuable. But if the averages hold true this time, you might not get more than like 12, 13 points in full PPR. So good luck with him. I think he's a little bit risky this week, but I think he will be ranked higher as the weeks go by. But right behind him in the same game, I have Chuba Hubbard at the Saints, and this is why you drafted him, for some early season production. Brooks is on IR, and you know for a fact you're getting a workhorse role out of Chuba Hubbard. That's what he had last season. In his last 6 games as the starter, he was seeing 19.2 touches per game, an average 3.7 yards per carry is nothing special, but 86 total yards per game, 1.8 reception per game, and with 3 touchdowns, an average of 12.5 points per game. So I kind of want to rank him above Kamara straight up, but I have him back to back because I think they're equally as valuable this game. If you look at week 14 last year when he was the starter versus the Saints, he gave you 2 catches, 96 total yards, no touchdowns, 10.6 points in that game, and that's probably a safe bet to make this week. But if the touchdown does hit this time, we are in business. You might see a top 15 finish from Chuba Hubbard this week if everything goes right. So he's a very safe flex play. I think if you have him in your lineup, you're going to be pretty happy with a guaranteed double-digit floor from Chuba. Number 23, though, I have Najee Harris of the Steelers at Atlanta, and it looks like Jaylen Warren is going to play. So the full ceiling for Najee is not unlocked here, but they probably don't give Jaylen Warren a full workload given he recently had a hamstring injury in the preseason. So I do think the floor is also very safe for Najee. He might score a touchdown. If he does, that ceiling would be nice, but you know that Arthur Smith wants to run the ball, and I think Najee's one of the safest options you can find outside the top 20. He is pretty much locked in to at least 10 fantasy points. If the touchdown hits, like I mentioned with Chuba, you could see a very high ceiling for Najee. But number 24, another player I'm pretty comfortable with starting this week. It's DeAndre Swift of the Bears versus Tennessee, and it is still a bit of a gamble when it comes to the exact touch split in this backfield, but the contract locks him into the RB1 role, and with Caleb Williams as the starting quarterback, there's always going to be some high upside scoring potential for the Bears. So Swift might get hurt. He has struggled to stay healthy throughout his career, but at the moment, he's fully healthy. Fire him up. I think he's a top 25 option in week 1 against the Titans. But number 25, I got Jerome Ford of the Browns versus Dallas. And kind of similar to Chuba Hubbard, this is why you drafted him for some early season guaranteed production while Nick Chubb is on IR. I think he's a very legit starter week in, week out. And if you look at his last 14 games last season when Nick Chubb wasn't on the field and he was the starting running back in 2023, Jerome Ford averaged 11.5 points per game on 14.9 touches per game, 2.8 receptions per game, 67 total yards per game, and 8 touchdowns. That's what I'm counting on. The touchdown production, I think, will be there. And he's also their pass-catching running back out of the backfield. So he's a high-end flex play every single week until Nick Chubb comes back. I have no concerns with Ford in my lineup. I'm going to be ranking him top 30 at the worst. There will be some matchups where he's top 20, but against Dallas, I think it's just average. I'm not like ecstatic about it. So that's why he's just here at number 25, safe, but maybe not elite. Number 26, I got Zamir White of the Raiders at the Chargers. And if you are pissed that this ranking is too low, it's because you're hoping that he maintains that 3-down workhorse role he had last season, filling in for Josh Jacobs. If you look at his last 4 games, he was really good. Averaged 14.1 points per game, 23 touches per game, 2.3 catches per game, 114 yards per game. He was hyper efficient, but only 1 touchdown. That's where I'm worried about his upside. I don't see a massive touchdown role for him this season. It's the Raiders. Like, how many touchdowns are they really going to offer in this offense? But I'm also not convinced he just has that exact same role straight up, at least not the target share. I do think it's a bit of a gamble week 1, but I could be too low. I will acknowledge that. The floor is very high, and he might get more work than I'm expecting. But I do think Madison and even Dylan Laube might filter in, especially on 3rd down for pass catching duties. And I think the Chargers do clamp down a little bit. They were so embarrassed the last time these two teams played. I think they will look far, far better at home. I do not expect 63 points on the scoreboard from the Raiders in this game. So that's why he's just a flex play for me. I think Zamir is a little bit risky until we know exactly what his role looks like this season. But he's still top 30. I think you could do far worse. I probably start him if I drafted him. But number 27, I got Rhamondre Stevenson of the Patriots at the Bengals. And yes, he should get a very big workload, especially after the contract extension he signed this offseason. But how good can this offense actually be with Jacoby Brissett and very few weapons aside from Rhamondre? I think the floor is high, but I'm very worried about his touchdown opportunities. I think he's just a flex play for now, and until Drake May gets in there, I'm not excited about the potential of this offense, and he's so touchdown dependent, I'm really worried it doesn't hit this week. So I'm kind of trying to bench him, but I get it if you're going to start him. Same applies with Javonte Williams. I am kind of worried about this committee over the course of the season, but at least in September, Javonte, I think, has the opportunity to maintain a large role as long as he plays well. Sean Payton will give him that chance to establish himself as the clear guy in this backfield, but I'm at least happy that he's fully healthy. He's now 2 years removed from his ACL tear, but it's at least a 2-man committee in this backfield. I think Jaleel McLaughlin is going to catch a lot more passes this season, but Seattle was a terrible run defense. They ranked bottom 2, allowing 138 rushing yards per game to their opponents last year. So I do see a very high floor for Javonte this week. If he finds the end zone, he could be a top 20 play. We'll see what this offense really has to offer, though. What can they do with Bo Nix? I think they win the game, but I think it's a very low-scoring game, and that's why I'm not like dying to force Javonte into my starting lineup. I do think he's a legit flex play, though. Anyone inside the top 30, I think you can talk yourself into starting if you need about 8-9 points guaranteed. But the touchdown gives him 15+ point upside, and I could be too low on Javonte as well. But number 29 is where I'm trying to start benching guys, but I think you can still settle for Brian Robinson Jr. of the Commanders on the road at Tampa Bay. It's kind of a gamble, though, when it comes to the touch split between him and Eckler. We cannot say for sure what it will look like. Jaden Daniels can also vulture a lot of rush attempts as well, and I'm a little bit worried about Brian Robinson's target share in this backfield, but I think he still has the goal line role on lock, but not that third down role. So in PPR, I would bump him down just slightly, but this matchup is why I'm the most concerned. Tampa Bay was a top 5 run defense last season. I don't see that changing very much. They maintained a lot of their front 7, and they only gave up 95 rushing yards per game last season. So it's not the best spot to force B-Rob into your starting lineup, but if you don't have a better option, I understand. He's still in the flex play consideration. I wouldn't feel great about it, but he could definitely score a touchdown and make it all worth your while. So at 29, go ahead, but I think there are some better options. We'll find out at the end of Sunday. But number 30 in the ranks, the last guy I would legitimately consider in my starting lineup is Devin Singletary of the Giants versus the Vikings. I am not worried about Tyrone Tracy, at least at this stage of the season. Tyrone Tracy might emerge later on, but at least week 1, Singletary is the guy. But this offense could be absolute dog shit. I do not trust Daniel Jones, and Singletary is not Saquon Barkley. So he's going to be very inefficient. It's a bad O-line, and it's just volume that carries you to somewhat of a comfort level. But the Vikings actually had a good run defense last year. They ranked top 8, allowing only 99 rushing yards per game, and Brian Flores could dial up a very good game plan, could shut down Devin Singletary very well. If you shut him down and you double team Malik Neighbors, what else does this offense have? I am very concerned about the upside here. So only if you're desperate would I start Devin Singletary, but I do see at least 15, 16 touches for him in this game. But moving forward, I'm trying to bench all of these guys. I think the backfields are a little too ambiguous, and the situation is a little concerning. For instance, I have Zach Moss and Chase Brown back-to-back here at number 31 and 32, and this game should be a blowout. So game script is going to benefit both of these players. It is good for both Cincinnati running backs. But what is the touch split? We do not know. It might be exactly 50-50 until one of the two can establish themselves as the better option in the pecking order. Maybe it's just a hot hand approach, and that makes it hard to bet on one of the two outright. I prefer Zach Moss because I assume he gets more of the goal line touches, but Chase Brown likely gets more targets and he might be more explosive. So I really don't know exactly what's going to happen. I'd rather just bench both of them until we know for sure and until we see both of them play a full game. I just don't know what to tell you. So I don't really trust what we saw in the preseason. It could easily change as early as week 1, and we'll find out when this game is over. But it's a tough spot because you would expect the Bengals to be leading heavily in this matchup. I think one of these running backs could be really good. I just can't tell you which one. Maybe they both score a touchdown. Maybe neither does. That's why I'd rather pass. But number 33, I have Jaylen Warren of the Steelers, and I think he has weekly flex value with upside moving forward. But coming off the hamstring injury, I do expect a slightly capped ceiling. I do think his touches are going to be limited. He's going to play, though. That is for sure. And in full PPR, he does have a lot more value because of his target share in the backfield. But I will be benching him in week 1. I don't trust him to be fully healthy and see a massive workload, so that's why I'd rather avoid it. The Falcons have a decent run defense as well. But number 34 and 35, I have Gus Edwards and JK Dobbins of the Chargers back-to-back, and neither Gus nor Dobbins played in the preseason, so we really have no idea what the touch split will look like in the Chargers offense. But Gus, I think, is safer. Dobbins is healthy, though, and at the moment, he definitely offers the higher ceiling of the two for sure. But it's going to come down to who scores a touchdown. It could be both of them. It could be neither. I do love this offensive line. It's really going to help them out. But until we see it on the field, I'm going to pass for now. There's always a scenario where one of these guys gets hurt immediately. Neither has been the safest bet to stay healthy. So if I had to pick one, I'd go with the Gus bus, but only because of the contract. I could see J.K. Dobbins as the guy you want in this backfield if he can stay healthy. We will find out. We will see soon enough. But I'm also benching both of the Titans running backs, Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. I have back-to-back versus Chicago on the road at 36 and 37. I hate this matchup. The Chicago Bears ranked first in run defense last season. They only allowed 86 rushing yards per game, and I don't think it got much worse. And this is also a true committee in Tennessee. So they both catch passes. They're both going to get plenty of touches, and that's really going to eat into the other's potential. I am not confident in this offense, and that's why I do not want to take this risk in week one in such a bad matchup. You could pick the right guy to start for sure. Maybe you'll choose the one that finds the end zone, but they're both extremely touchdown dependent in my opinion, and it might not hit for either of them. So that's why I'm going to avoid this backfield week one. I was low on both guys though entering the season. I could be too low overall. I'd just rather avoid the risk of betting on one and being wrong. So until I see it, I just don't want to trust it. I hate the matchup as well. Number 38 and 39, another ambiguous backfield here. The Rico Dowdle, Ezekiel Elliott experience is underway for Dallas, and that's why I have them at 38-39 week one at Cleveland. I don't want to trust it. I prefer Dowdle long term, but I can't say that he's a lock to be their better option week one. It could be Zeke because he does know the system, and he's also fully healthy at the moment. He's on the older side of the spectrum, and I think he will start to fade as the weeks go on. It will shift in favor of Dowdle inevitably, but maybe Dowdle has a much bigger role right out the gate. It is possible, but I don't know that for sure. The Browns do have a better pass defense, but they were still top 12 versus the run last year. It's a great defense overall. So I'm going to bench both of them and have a more decisive opinion on them next week. After we see it, I will be watching this game very closely. I'm hoping Rico Dowdle works out, but until I see it, I just can't endorse it in the starting lineup. It's a little too risky to bet on. But number 40, I have Austin Eckler at the Bucks, and it's a tough matchup here. Tampa Bay was a top 5 run defense, but they probably have a lead throughout the game, and that could lead to more targets for Eckler. But I do prefer Robinson. I trust his goal line role a lot more than Eckler's, and I'd rather just avoid starting Austin Eckler until it's clear that he actually has flex value. I don't know if that is even the case at all this season. So I'm going to keep him on the bench week one. I'm not going to gamble on Eckler on a new team that we have never seen before. It's completely new pieces all across the board in Washington. So I'm going to pass on Eckler for sure. And then these last 10 I'll just mention, but there's no way I'm starting them in my lineup. I have Jaleel McLaughlin at 41. I actually think there's some high upside here, but until I see it, I'll avoid taking the risk unless I drafted poorly and am forced to put him in the lineup. At 42, I have Ty Chandler at the Giants. If the Vikings want to keep Aaron Jones healthy, then Chandler is going to have a consistent weekly role in this committee. It's a good matchup as well, so he might be a sneaky start, but without proof, it's just not safe. I will pass. I'm also not going to start Tyler Algier versus the Steelers. Reports indicate that he is going to have a role, but he's still just behind Bijan and more so just a handcuff option for fantasy. No, thank you. I'm also benching Zach Charbonnet. He could see a drastically reduced role this year. It's too risky to bet on at the moment. Number 45, I have Jordan Mason versus the Jets, and maybe they mix him in a little more this week just to keep Christian McCaffrey on the bench a little bit, give him some rest after that preseason injury. They do not want him to aggravate it at all, but I doubt it actually amounts to any fantasy upside for Mason. I will keep him on the bench at the moment. I'm also going to bench Khalil Herbert versus the Titans. Maybe he has a decent role, but we just don't know that yet. It's too risky. It's also very risky to start Justice Hill at the Chiefs, but if Baltimore does take the Titans approach of easing in Derrick Henry week one, then that means Justin Hill would get a slight uptick in volume. It's just not enough to trust, but maybe in full PPR, he has like 4 or 5 catches. Who knows? But to actually start him, no fucking chance. Number 48, I'm going to bench Antonio Gibson as well at the Bengals. Strictly PPR value for him, not enough to trust, but maybe there's some garbage time that sends him like 5 or so targets in the fourth quarter. But no thanks, not going to start Gibson. I'm also not going to start Deontay Foreman versus Dallas. I'm honestly not sure if him or Pierre Strong is going to have that Kareem Hunt role to start the year without Nick Chubb. But if you look back to last season, it could be very valuable. Kareem Hunt scored 9 total touchdowns last year while Nick Chubb was out. So who knows? Maybe the backup in Cleveland is a guy you want on your roster, but I'm definitely not starting him. I'm only relying on Ford. But last player I'll mention is Ray Davis of the Bills versus Arizona. I want to rank him higher, but until I see it, I will not endorse the rookie just yet. Let's hope he turns out well, but I don't really want that to happen. I want James Cook to see all the volume himself. And those are my running back rankings this week. These are the top 40 on the screen here, and I really trust the top 18. I think all the way through Raheem Mostert, you are getting excellent players in your lineup. Even Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara feel pretty good. I just don't think they have like the highest ceiling this week. So the top 20 are very safe. The top 13, I think, are must starts. You cannot bench them no matter what. But until we hit like Javonte Williams, Brian Robinson, Devin Singletary, I'm not actually like trying to bench anyone. That's where it gets dicey, and only until the top 31 am I like, no, I don't know enough in this backfield to actually endorse starting them. So there's a lot of good options. I think Chuba Hubbard's going to be a really excellent flex play this week. Jerome Ford as well. And if you drafted him as your flex, you're in really good shape. But those top 13, 14 guys will be elite. I definitely trust them the most. So that's going to be it for this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. And tomorrow I'll hit the wide receiver position. Look out for that on the channel. But my name's Adam Riancho. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.